Yeah, no, and the old days we had,
You know, the business, when we're starting to work it in January and February, the bottom line on it is staying focused. You know, and then if you stay focused, it generates your March and April. So it leads you for the whole year.
I don't think. I know, they could start out hard and this rock was, they're not that. I'm on the tires.
You're on that plan, you're on that. See, what's happening in the real estate market right now is, I mean, we're gonna talk a little bit about the numbers. Unrealistic, put it on the market, and then we as agents are having to try to get that property brought back down to where it's more realistic. And that's becoming the struggle, because guess what we see in news and social media? Social media is out pumping, saying valuations are going up 5-6%. And they are in certain properties, but not all of them. And so we end up having to deal with properties at times that are overpriced, and then we're having to try to work it back. Now, the biggest problem we're running into is fall throughs. You know, the fall through issue is becoming big with the repair properties, because the properties that are not in 100% good condition, what are we seeing? What you're seeing out there currently now is the repairs that are coming to the surface. So if you're a listing agent, my recommendation to you is get a termite report immediately. So you can see what you're dealing with. It's going to assist you on trying to determine the valuation, but it's going to get rid of an obstacle. The obstacle we're running into is, unfortunately, is that we list the property for maybe premium pricing, and then somebody gets a psychological effect that they think that property is worth that. So then we go in, we try to ask for repairs, and we ask for repairs, guess what? We don't want to do repairs because they think about the old market that we just come out of, that you didn't have to do it. So my recommendation to you, invest $75, $100, tell the client that they need to do that, see what's going on. Because that gives you some insight on what you're dealing with the client. Then you're putting them on notice that, hey, I may have to do some repair work, because nobody wants to inherit somebody else's termites. You know, so then it also helps you in the marketing. So when you go to sell a property, then the bottom line on it is you put it under the attachments and add it there. So when you put it under the attachments, then they already see that there's some work already being done on it. It kind of eliminates some of that issues that you're working with. I've talked to agents about this market. This market is a little unique. At 11 to 1,400 square feet, it's amazing what you see price per square footage. I thought it was primary investors, but you can go in and take a look at the MLS services, and you see a lot of it's FHA financing. And the FHA financing, guess what we know? It's owner occupied if it's single family res. So apparently that those price points are holding pretty well. And so we're not seeing a reduction in that area. The bigger square footage houses is where I'm seeing most of the price reductions. Big square footage, higher end price points, most of those are starting to see, I'm starting to see some reductions. 2-story houses, I'm seeing more of it. Actually, there's pretty dang good buys out there in the 2-story market. You know, if you really look around, that price per square footage is some of the lowest that you'll find out there. Because you won't generally won't find it in a single story being lower. So just have some awareness of it. When you guys are on out there comping your properties, you comp 2 stories against 2 stories. I know appraisers will bring in a single story because they have to deal with some issues. Install the most recent sale in the area. They can't get around it, even if it, in most cases, even if it's a 2-story, 1-story. But 1 stories on a square footage basis is holding stronger than the 2 stories. The 2 stories are seeing more price reductions. Somebody said, well, why is that the case? Well, you know, if you have more 2-story houses and you have less 1 stories, it's supply and demand, right? So that's the bottom line on this. As people get older, they don't want stairwells, stuff like that. So you're finding the people that's really got the money sometimes are staying away from the 2 stories and buying single stories. So that's what you're seeing out there. That's what you do when you start working with your clients. Just have some awareness of who you're working with or what you're working with. If it's a young couple, yeah, they want, you know, most of them want to have a 2-story. I never forget when I was younger, I had to have a 2-story. After I had a 2-story about 6 years, I decided, well, I actually ended up getting a divorce before it was over. It may have not all been about the 2-story, but it ended up going south. So the absorption rates, when you guys are looking at it, it don't make any difference whether you're part of the Rapattoni system or you work, you know, the one that the system we work in Queens County, or the one here in Tulare County, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. They all have places to get market summaries, and so it's not that hard to do. If you need some help with it, feel free to give us a call. I mean, Kevin or myself would be more than happy to help you, or your managers in your local offices. That's increasing. The time on the market's increasing. So why is that a problem? Well, the problem of it is it consumes more of your time as an agent to try to get to closing. So it takes just longer to close. You know, if we had a market that you could close in 12, 14 days, 30 days, man, you know, I mean, it was different. So you were able to do more because you're having to deal with less issues. Now we have to deal with more issues. So you have to watch that. I mean, that's just going to be part of what you're doing. The cumulative days on the market is increasing. I mean, it's not going down, and I'm not going to sit here and give you projections for the next 12 months. I mean, me personally, I think that's, it's not stuff I would do. The bottom line on it is reality is reality. And so what you have to do is find out what the market is doing now and you work within that environment. Sold listings, they're off a little bit. Starting off in January. January was actually a little bit slow. But if you took the last 12 months, that we ended in December, really pretty consistent. The market hadn't been too much in a shift in any of the areas in the arena, except for new listings and stuff like that. So we're kind of rolling along, just somewhat all the way across all of these markets, down a little bit. It didn't start off as quick as we thought. At the bottom line on it is on souls, what happened, that all started in December. December is generally where you put your deals together and then we close them out. Our timelines are increasing. We're seeing a longer timeline. So we're not closing in 15 days. We're closing in 30, 45 to 60 days. So just have awareness when you guys are working as a real estate agent. Pending sales, they're up. Actually, it's been across the whole arena that I monitor. But the problem of it is the pendings are up, but those closings are not coming. We used to get a pending, we'd get a closing, right? We didn't have to worry about it falling through or nothing. I mean, it was a sense of urgency and everything that went on. Now, what the problem of it is, we got pretty hefty fall through ratios. I don't want you getting upset because you have a deal fall through. Because the probability of it happening is better than what it used to be. It is what it is. So you just have to have the realization of it. So when you get an offer coming in on the property, you keep the offer alive. You make sure you keep that offer alive. Bottom line on it is you counter it. You have to resubmit it. You have to do whatever you have to do to try to keep that offer going. Because somebody might give you a rejection on the first go around, the first offer they see, but the second offer that comes in, or even having that client resubmit a brand new offer, can't possibly get you a set. So because you already had somebody that was interested. Sometimes when you do that, let's say the offer got rejected, you wait a couple of weeks, then you go back to that client with a brand new offer. It can be the same dollar amount or just slightly higher. And it might have changed the way they look at it. Because a lot of times people think the first offer is, especially when it comes in less than what it's listed for, is that they're going to get a better one. So just understand that when you're working in the business, this is a different environment we're currently in. The active listings are are rising. So I'm not doing any projections there. That's just doing it every month. It's just been going up. It's just been rising. Now, what the problem is on the active listings is the properties that have issues are starting to set. And so when they start to set, then they would get an offer. If you're the listing agent, there's probably issues with the property. So if it's starting to set. So what is the issues? Could it be the seller? Absolutely. Could it be the property itself? Yes, it could be the issue. Could be location. Location is starting to come into play a little bit more. If you start looking at some of these geographical locations, it's starting to change. Now, what you're going to start to see based on just looking at the numbers, this is not a projection. These markets start shrinking back down into your major metropolitan areas. So some of those outlying areas that might have been a real hot market at one time, like Corcoran and some of those, they're going to sink back in because people will be able to find housing in the more populous areas. So you're going to see some of that as time passes. I mean, that's normal. There's nothing unusual about it. So the active listings that I'm seeing out there, why are they setting? Some of them just not getting price reductions. I'm not sure why the agent isn't attacking that issue. And I know I've talked to some agents and I asked them, I said, have you talked to your client? Well, no, I haven't talked to the client. I said, well, you need to talk to the client. That's the first thing you do. Well, I've done the comps on it. I mean, it looks like to me it's comped out. Okay, it's okay. Well, obviously it's not. because it's set there. It's been sitting there for 30 days. I've had agents call me about this and I said, okay, well, let me go take a look at it. I go in, and guess what I do? Actually, I went out to some of the agents' open houses and, but the real problem that I'm seeing is pictures. The pictures are a huge problem. And then somebody said, well, I'm really frustrated because I'm an agent. I went and looked at the pictures. Man, this thing looked good. And I took a client out there and it's a train wreck. Well, guess what? Those pictures are only designed to do one thing. Bring the customer. Then you gotta go out and do the sale. So when you go out and do the sale, if the property's not what you think it should be, you can say, look, you gotta start talking. You say, well, probably gonna need some paint, probably gonna need some carpeting and flooring. You probably would have done that anyway, right? You probably would have remodeled your kitchen. You might do some of these different things that would come up, but you gotta do your sales. And then they say, well, I'm not gonna pay full price. Fine, pay a lower price, but let's get something started. Going out for the perfect home is not probably gonna happen. So you have to understand, there's a lot of different variables that would cause. Most people's mindset now is probably has a repair on their mind if they're a buyer. So when you guys are working with them, make sure you understand what you're dealing with there. Always, when you're showing a piece of property, look at time on listing. How long has this property been on the market? Don't just look at the pictures. Take a look and see how long it's been on the market. You have to rethink how you do. Okay, it's been on the market for a while. So when you start dealing with that, then you're listening to your client all the time. Stay in communication with your client, but I'm going to tell you right up front, you better stay away from texting because texting is interpreted. So you don't want to offend your client. Now, if the client wants to communicate by texting, that's one thing. And that you don't have any options. But communicating with them, talking to them individually, you start getting a feel for where they're coming from. Everybody has a reason why they're selling, but in most cases, we don't know what it is. We think we know what it is. Well, I'm moving somewhere else. Okay, well, you're moving somewhere else. How strong is the motivation? Is somebody, you're moving closer to your children or whatever you're doing? Understand those things when you're working on it. I had an agent call me up and said that that the agent from another real estate company, I could never dream this stuff up because I only talk to you guys about really what goes on. And the agent from the other company said that they thought that they were deceived because of the quality of the pictures, because when they went out to the property, it didn't look like that. And the agent says, well, what do you think? I said, I think the agent that you were talking to has probably missed the boat. They don't understand. They have to understand how to sell. They got a lead. They got to understand how to sell. The pictures are never supposed to sell property. Pictures don't do that. Now, pictures can turn clients away immediately. You go out there with your cell phone and think you're a professional photographer, you might be able to pull it off. But if you don't have wide lenses, and I realize I think 16's coming out with a wide lens on it, and Apple is, but the bottom line on it is leave it to the professional and and somebody said, well, it costs money. Well, that's what we're in. We're independent contractors. We have to market. We have to do what we have to do. But if you got to get decent pictures. So you put decent pictures in, you get decent marketing, and that's what you're going to have to do in that arena. The new listings, they're coming on, but believe it or not, they're more than what they were prior January, and they're up overall. With the new listings, though, it's the quality you have to start looking for. And somebody said, well, what do you mean quality? Does the price point make sense? Does the condition of the property make sense? And somebody said, well, how do I get that? I realize we have a lot of programs that will get you numbers. You can go in, it's a quick fix, and it's analytics is all it is, and it goes in, or you can talk to, you can talk to the AI guy, wherever they're at. The bottom line on it is, all of this stuff is important, But you have to go into your local MLS service and you're going to have to run your own comps. You're going to have to compare against the properties geographically within the area. No more than a mile. Try to get yourself into quarter mile, half mile, and then do your comparisons based off that. Because if you miss it, you're going to have a problem. But the one thing that I will tell you, where do you think that customer is going before you ever go out there to meet them?
New construction.
They're going to be on Realtor.com, or they're going to be on Homes.com. They're going to be all of them. Guess what? The analytics are already shooting there. For you to go out there and use that same data, and that data's missed it because maybe one subdivision is extremely more valuable area than another, it's going to throw the numbers off. So make sure you stay geographically within the subdivision areas that you're working in. And also, analytics does not take in consideration condition of the property. It just doesn't do it. So that's where you're coming in, and that's where your value is. So you'd be able to do those comparisons. So we're going to move on to solar. Solar is a nightmare. In some cases it's not. I was working with an agent here the other day. He emailed me several questions. And I said, well, where's the contract? Well, I don't have the contract. Well, the client wants to know the answer to these questions. I said, we don't provide that information. That's not what we do. I says, first off, I said, you need to get a copy of the contracts because you can't sell that property unless we resolve that solar. That's where we're at. There's a lot of things with houses that we could sell and we're okay, but we can't solve it unless we get the solar information. So today we're going to talk about solar. We're going to talk about what I'm seeing and what some of the things going on. If we can't get the solar contract, then you're probably not going to be able to close the deal. So when you go out to list a piece of property, the first thing you've got to understand is you need to look around the roof of the house and see if there's solar up there. And if you we had a deal here not too long ago, and the solar panels did not appear on the front of the house, but they were on the back, and nobody realized it, and the solar didn't communicate it. So you have to go out, look around the house. Yes, we have to look higher than we ever looked before and see if it's there. And if it's there, then you need to attack the issue. And that means at time of listing, you need the solar contract. I know we get excited and we go out and list piece of property and they don't have, and most of these clients, believe it or not, they don't know what the paperwork is, they can't find it, they don't even know what they did. And if you've seen the way some of these solar companies are working, they just come in and say, hey, we're gonna put solar in your house, we're gonna do it for free. And oh, by the way, here's my my iPad, and you just sign here, and within about 5 minutes, you bought $100,000 worth of solar. So, and guess what? You just bought the house 3 years ago. And its equity has only went up maybe 5% per year. You've got an overleaned property. So you got to be careful. So let's talk about these common solar. There's different types. There's the purchase of a solar system with a loan. That historically is going to have to be paid off. We're going to talk about it a little bit further, a little bit later. HERO and Hope financing, if you see anything that references that, I'm going to be talking about it later on, but it is tied to the tax records in most cases. And then we have lease solar. And then we have power purchase agreements. Now, the biggest problem I run into working with agents, some within our own company, but most of the time within other companies, is that they have done maybe a lease and they actually think that they have some expertise dealing with the power agreement. They're totally two different animals. They're totally different. New systems are offering battery backup. This is what's new. And this is what you're seeing on most houses that are being today. Why is that? Because that's where all the rebates are at. And so they're ugly. I mean, we've dealt with cases where these power agreements have been in place 12 months, 14 months. And they were trying to get them paid off, and they're 100,000 plus. And then there's another ugly issue. Is that they prey on the elderly. You know, I'm not saying it's illegal. But there's definitely, you can tell you're running analytics on older generation people. Because a lot of this stuff we're seeing and we're working within our own company. Is that these are older people. That has had maybe a son get involved with signing the paperwork. And then they end up it's not even hooked up in the system. And they're in convalescent. So for us to try to settle it, it costs a lot of money because they have to be paid off if it's a power agreement. So it's very, very difficult and it's very predatory. And unfortunately, with the state of California, they do have a little consumer thing, but it's all tied to the contractors that put the system up on the roof, not the person in most cases that is actually selling product. When you open your door and you have a young man that's doing high pressure sales and want to get into your house and do things like that, and then they bring along the closer to do it, you start thinking, well, there's something really wrong with this whole system. If you've ever traveled in your lifetime and you went out and you went to a place where they sold timeshares, this is the same type of program. So once you get hooked on it, you can't get loose from it. So that's what we're looking at. So listing and buyer's agents understand the transfer process of solar. We do a pretty good job here at the company. I mean, I work with a lot of our agents. Most of our problem is tied to the other agent and their lack of knowledge or lack of even understanding of how the industry works and how you're gonna find solar is gonna be tied with all your newer construction. Anything that was built in recent years has solar. It had, in most cases, it has minimum. So at solar in general, what we see is that the builder will go out, put the minimum on, and you can lease it, you can do a power agreement, you can do a purchase. But now we're starting to see new construction and actually throwing it into the sales price. It wasn't that long ago, about 2 years ago, if you really looked at it, you went out to new construction. And the solar was out there, you could buy it for $32,000. You still, now it's down to about 15. So if the price for whatever reason reduced in some areas, I don't know if it was inflated because of how much profit they were making or what. Or the builders got control of it because the builders are, they're adding it into their sales price. One thing I want you to do. You have the owner provide a copy of the agreement involving the solar system. Don't make an opinion as to what they tell you. Most of them will tell you they own it. In most cases, they don't. They either lease it or they have a power agreement. So don't formulate an opinion with that because most of these people have been misguided. So get a copy of it. If you don't understand it, if you follow these guidelines here that I provided, it's probably going to give you your answers, but you can feel free to give me a call. But when you give me a call, you got to send it to me. I won't give you an opinion unless I've seen it. So once I see it, then I can tell you how we're going to handle it. We have to know how we're going to handle it because we can't sell property and have this slip through because it just won't do it because unless somebody's paying cash for something, this whole solar has got to be resolved. So we've got to work with it. Once you get a copy of it, I want it placed in the attachments in the MLS. I need to cut down your headaches. Get it in the attachments. If you have termite, it's another example. If you have a report, put it in there. I don't care if it's been done or it's not been done. Make your life simple. There's no big secret here. This is all got to be resolved prior to close of escrow. So put it in your attachments. And if you put in your attachments and you tell me about it, I'll pull it up on myself and look at it. You don't even have to resend it to me. Know if the system is owned, leased, or power purchase. If you're working with a buyer, check the attachment every time to see if it's there. Because what we don't want to be doing with our buyer is selling them a piece of property and then we have some nightmare involved in solar. If we talk to them about it up front, then we're gonna get it resolved easier. There's too many obstacles now in the real estate market that's causing people to fall through. I see some days that we have more fall throughs than we have closings. So let's get all these obstacles out of the way right up front. Now, why do you have to know the difference between these? And I'm gonna explain that to you because as we move forward here. Determine if the transfer can be transferred to a new buyer. It's within the contract. It's in there. I'm more than happy to look at it for you. But it tells you in the contract how it can be transferred. It's already there. Yeah, it's got 45 pages. I don't want to waste my time on it. Well, you're gonna waste more time by not checking. Or at least calling and talking to me about it, because I'm gonna give you the guidelines, and that's how you're gonna have to try to roll it through. The seller is to provide authorization to the buyer to contact the solar company. We're not the middle person. You know, I just got off the phone a week ago. And the agent's telling me, well, you know, they want me to follow up on something that closed escrow 2 months ago. And involving the solar. We don't have anything to do with it. You call a solar company, do whatever you gotta do, but it's not our deal. And we've got to keep ourselves distanced from that. I run into that more than once, so you can't be an expert. If you try to be an expert, then they're gonna think you are supposed to be the solar guy. So you keep referring them back to the solar company. Somebody said, well, the solar company went bankrupt. Well, that's common, because guess what? That's what happens when you're dealing with these loan sharks sometimes. And some of these people are reputable. Some of these solar companies are reputable, but more of them are not. And what happens is they go bankrupt after 2 or 3 or 4 years. Why do they go bankrupt? They don't have to deal with the warranty. You know, I'm gonna give you a 10-year warranty. Whoa, I forgot to tell you, I'm going to go bankrupt in the next 3 years. So that's really what causes that. The solar transfer are buyer and seller responsibility, not escrow. Do not ever rely on escrow, and I keep running into this. Matter of fact, I wish the person that got in trouble with this one was here today. Got down to close of escrow, guess what? Well, I thought the title company was gonna take care of it. Well, guess what? Now, what do we know about solar companies? They have 30 days. I've seen in some contracts 45 days to get the transfer done. You know, and then guess what? Your loan docs go back, the interest rates could change. Now you're starting to realize how important this solar is day one. Provide a copy to the buyer's lender. Make sure that the buyer lender is aware of what's going on, because there's payment structures tied to it, and I noticed lenders are handling it differently. So get a copy over to them, and they say, oh, it's not a problem. And then you go do your next deal and say, oh, well, the last one was the deal. Why do I need to give it to the lender? You give it to the lender because it varies from lender to lender. You got to deal with it. So let's talk about lease solar system. The lease solar system generally was the one that come out originally years ago when they first started working in these environments. The lease was the most common. It's a 25-year, most cases, 30 years, seen 20 years, but most of it was just pretty cut and dry. What we did with it is when we sold the property, we just find out what it is, get them transferred. If they had a FICO score of 600 to 650, it was not a problem. And then if you didn't have it and you were down to 500, they charge a fee. Now don't try to explain that one to me. Why would you charge a fee for $500 because they didn't make a 600 FICO score? what difference does it make? But that's what you start running into. So then the seller is to contact the leasing company for instructions on how to transfer. Guess what? The seller says, I don't want to do that. That's your guys' job. I don't even know what I signed. It's up there on the roof. I look at it every day as I drive by when I come home. Some of these people don't even understand how the thing works. So, I mean, it's just problematic. So you have the seller contact the leasing company. That keeps you harm's way. We don't want the liability associated with it. Have the buyer contact the leasing company. Absolutely. Transfer documents provided to escrow prior to close of escrow. In other words, the transfer documents could come into your possession as an agent, not normal. Normally, it's ends up at the title company. The title company has the paperwork, and that's how to transfer. Sometimes they do it between the buyer and seller. It just depends. A lot of these transfers are coming out of Florida. There's 4 major companies working out of there, and they take care of this transfer. So basically, these solar companies that go out and do their thing, and then they have a third party that handles the transfers. The UCC-1 security agreement is attached to the property. I need you to look at your preliminary title report and see if it's there. If it's there, if there's a loan coming into play, it's not going to be transferred, period. It's not going to be transferred even on a buyer situation. You know, the bottom line is they're paying cash. So that's the security. Now, what they say when they're out selling this product, what do they say? Well, we won't put a lien on your property. You put a UCC, it's just as good as a lien any day of the week. So it's a game they play, and they shouldn't be doing it. Hero on Hope Financing Loans. Here's what it is. The payment on the loan is paid through the property taxes, and it's part of the impound account. So I mean, somebody could put it in an impound account. We had these originally in some of these areas, and also in Tulare County, and then there was so much fraud tied to it, they ended up canceling it. Can't do them in Tulare County. I'm not even sure you can do it in any counties anymore. But those are around. And so when you see one of those, it has to be paid off. There's no options. And you make sure there's enough equity to pay it off. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in a transaction and it doesn't move forward. The owner solar power systems, the solar system by the seller is currently making payments on a loan. That's going to be a lien. You're going to see that there. Excuse me. So that one, we got to get it paid off in most cases, unless they pay cash for it. It's got to be paid off. And we've worked several systems. We've tried to get them assumed. They do everything they can because those people want their money now. And the original notes on those was pretty low, 2.5%, 3%. Well, yeah, they want that note paid off because they want their money back. They completely own the system. And then when they own the system, we're requiring here at the office, and we're going to be talking about it. You've got to complete the solar form, and I'll be going through that with you. The seller is still making payments. You need to know the balance, so that form will cover these things, and we'll deal with that. And not enough equity in the property, and then what do we do with that? We found solar systems in general will not reduce their price, even if there's not enough equity in it. And so these properties will end up going back. So I don't want you beating yourself up with this one. And somebody asked me about a short sale involving the solar. Yeah, it can be done, but we just got to look at the circumstances of it. Buyer and seller may agree to pay off the solar at the close. That's negotiated. It's just like anything else. We've done this. You know, seller pays 10 of it, buyer pays 10 of it. You know, we come up with a solution that way. So that could happen. Feel free to contact me about it. We'll talk about it. Power purchase agreement is the thing out there now. When state of California changed their freebie program around for solar, They moved over to a power grid. And most residential, commercials a little bit different, but the bottom line on this is. It's transferable, but generally after 5 years. And no, I'll take it back. It's transferable from day one. You can pay it off after 5, I'm sorry, I think. You're gonna have to get your FICO score approved, but we're not seeing any problems with that. You should be fine. We're seeing them, and because if you can get a loan on a house now, the FICO score is probably gonna be strong enough to cover it. But most on these power agreements is 600 to 650 depending. So we're not seeing a big issue with it. Have the seller contact solar, company, absolutely. Have the buyer contact the information. Transfer documents to be provided escrow, same thing as you're doing with the other. But during the first 5 years, trying to pay this off, we've already done 2 or 3 of these. And it's just like getting it, they're like a bunch of bandits, they're very hard to work with. We've had incidents where we've had to pay off over 100,000. They're just sucking the equity out of these properties. And should never have been put on the property in the first place. That comes with senior abuse in the cases I've been seeing, so you gotta be careful with that. The common issues of solar, buyer no longer qualifies for the loan because of the solar payment. It's a big problem, that's why I want to with the lender. Listing agent at time of listing, that's security information involving it. Guess what? We can't close it. Then we all of a sudden we have to start dealing with it. Solar company went bankrupt. That's gonna happen. Most of these companies have gone bankrupt. It's deliberate. They're going out, they're getting huge profit right up front. And then they're just jumping overboard. The warranties, we get a lot of questions on that. Most of these companies will go bankrupt just because of that. They don't want to deal with the warranty. So if your client asks you about it, say, you just have to check with the solar company or get your own warranty. Short sale and foreclosed properties with solar. Generally, it's going to need to be paid off. It depends on what equity positions, and if you've ever done short sales, which we've done a lot here at the company, there's a lot of different variables tied to it, so we'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Seller's payment delinquent on solar system, make sure they're current. Ask them the question. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not honest with you. So you're gonna have to check with the solar company. Because those will have to be brought current for a power agreement or a lease. And any of it, it's all gonna have to be brought current. Solar system is not transferred with the sale of the property. We're dealing with one of those right now. I don't even know how it happened. And we're trying to get it untangled. We got by everybody. Didn't get by me because I didn't see me. The bottom line on it is, you get one of those, that's a huge issue because it stays with the current, the past owner of the property. And then you got the new owner and said, "Oh, I thought it was a gift." It's a gift, all right. It's the gift of nightmares. So I mean, the bottom line on it is, we don't want any of that. We want everything transferred like it should be. And the roof gets damaged by installing companies, and my suggestion to you is what they do is they go up there, they warrant these houses, and it depends, when they put the system on originally, they'll go, "Oh, well, we give 1 year warranty, 5-year warranty." They just, you see all kinds of things, but it's the same company that goes bankrupt, right? So they go bankrupt after 3 years, we'll give you 5-year warranty. Well, if you gone bankrupt, guess what? And it's not gonna work. My suggestion to you is if you've got a buyer, they need to get a roof inspection on these houses, because anytime people are walking around on these, especially these concrete roofs and stuff like that, there's gonna be damage. And it gets, for them to go in and what happens is you get some shifting of some of those tiles, and You get somebody out there to take a look at it, and the ones I've been seeing with our company, you're looking $2,500. Just for them to reset the tiles back where they're supposed to be or replace the damaged ones. So if you're dealing with that situation, you may wanna, I'm not, it's not something that's required, but it's something you need to have some awareness of. Buyers intending to use the property for rental use, the solar is problematic. Now, we have closed some deals involved in this. They work it out with the property management company. There's some way that they're figuring the cost factors, and I just don't know how it works, but it's very problematic. Solar advisory, we're gonna go over that. The company's gonna require this. And so we're gonna go to the solar advisory. The solar advisory, the first page, if you just read the first page, it tell you all about solar.
Bill, can I ask a quick
Yeah,
question?
sure,
I
absolutely.
don't know if you want them at the end or now.
Yeah.
Have you seen or heard of anybody that's had a system and then putting the batteries on now and then they've tried to deal with selling the property?
Okay.
Or the batteries then?
Well, that's actually a good question, and the question is that you put an original system on and then you come back and try to put a battery system in place. The reason why that's happening, I've just seen a little bit of it, is because they can't get credits. For the batteries, that's where all the credits are now. It's not so much in the panels. So they go out, they buy a new house that's got a minimum solar system on it, 6, 8 panels, depends on the square footage, but. And then what happens is these solar companies come in behind the sale, usually within, 12 or 24 months. You could be even longer. And then they sell the new system. And they sell the system with power backups. Now I'm seeing this, I've talked to people. They come out, they take a look at it, solar system is not functioning properly, which they all deteriorate a certain amount every year. So then they come out and say, oh, we'll sell you a new system, but we'll sell you a battery. And we're gonna sell you a battery, and then it's a separate system. So in other words, you have two systems running side by side, so you have to get all the information on both of the systems. And they both have to be transferred. Now, I will tell you, anytime you're putting those batteries on, that is expensive and it's pushing the pricing through the city. So you gotta be careful with it. So we're seeing a lot of solar that has two different systems on the property. So that's the reason why we want you to use the solar advisor. Now, some clients, sometimes I don't think they have an awareness of it. I was dealing with one and we were talking to it and they said, oh, no, they just come out and did some repair work. But the payment went up. I'm thinking, well, that's strange. Payment went up because they ended up with a second payment. That's what happened.
I have one other real quick question.
Go ahead.
Have we actually dealt with any of them where the systems, I think some of the PPAs were like only 20 years at
Yeah.
one time? What are we doing when we're like at the 19th or 20th year or 21 years? I mean,
Okay, let's talk about
how do
it.
we deal with that or the buyer?
Well, at the end of the contract, let's say we got to the end of the contract, and I mean, there's a provision in there everywhere. Some contracts state that we will come back out and have it reevaluated, and if you want to purchase it, then you can. Or we'll take it off. Now, we already know they're not gonna take it off. The 20-year-old solar system is not gonna be taken off. It's junk up on the roof.
Yeah.
Actually, by the time you got to 10 years, most solar systems are junk. So they're not gonna take it off, and they're not going, and they may say you gotta pay something. Bottom line on it is probably, you got some wild one out there thinking that they actually have value. And they're not gonna do anything. I can't project the future, but I can tell you that there's nobody gonna come out and pay the cost to remove it. I don't think. To try to move a solar system from one property to another, it's 8 to 10,000. So I've never seen one move, but we did have a client that was wanting to move it to another property in Tulare County under it. And so you just don't want to do it. So I don't think you have to worry about it.
So-
But what would we do? we would have the seller at the end of the 20-year time span, get it resolved. And then we go from there. We haven't got to that point with the systems yet, because most of them haven't been around 20 years.
Now, is there any warranties companies that are second part or third parties that will?
There's warranty companies out there, but I would never recommend anybody. Most of them are not going to deal with it. Here's the problem with at the end of 10 years, the inverters are probably going to have gone south. Where with these original companies, they say, oh, we'll go out at the end of 10 years and put replace the inverters instead. They don't want to do that. That's the reason why they go bankrupt. It's expensive. So what you're seeing out there is that I can't imagine anybody warranting it. It could be expensive. It could be, I think Sunrun does it. You know, because they buy a lot of these bankrupt companies and they probably do something in those arenas, but it's not something we're gonna provide any information on or knowledge of. All right, so let's talk about we're gonna work on this form. Okay, so this solar form, what's interesting about the solar form is we're gonna give it to the client. What's the client gonna do?
Fill it out.
They're gonna fill it out. And then they're gonna say, I don't know anything about this thing. Okay, well, you gotta explain what you know.
Yeah.
If you don't, and then I had AG come to me and said, they're not doing yes or no, huh? They don't have to do yes or no, I just give the form to them. And they can do whatever they want with it, because in most cases, they don't know. I would probably say 90% of the time they don't know. I could almost get it to 100%, but it's an approximate age of the solar system, they might know that. So they possibly know. The name of the installation company, I don't know if they would know that.
Yeah.
Because it's a third-party contractor. You know, Sunrun is different, because they do their own installing. Tesla does their own installing, but all these other guys running around out there, they got a third party runner. Does the solar power system provide power only to a portion of the property? Yeah, they should know that. Right. I mean, they should know that one. Approximate size of the panels, probably don't know. You could get it from the contract, but that's them. We're not doing it, right? We're not touching the contract. We're not filling out the form. Whether the system is central inverter or micro inverters, that's what I was talking about, generally has to be replaced at the end of 10 years. So that's the reason. So it has one or the other. They probably don't know. And then they say, well, I'm gonna call the solar company, and the solar company went bankrupt, and then a new company, they took them over and says, I don't know. So it's gonna be I don't know story. They need to put a third form out here that says, I don't know.
That's what they need.
Yeah,
So what do we do with this then?
yeah,
Tell
so
them
it
to do-
is,
It does say it, but
Are you
Where?
aware?
it's just what you're aware of.
So they just say no then, or they're better too?
We don't advise whether the system is battery bank, this is the big, the battery bank power wall is run off the grid. Well, this is not running off the grid in most cases. These power agreements but it could run off the grid. In other words, if you lost power for 24 hours, right, would you be off the grid?
Right,
So, I mean,
we're still
It
connected
could.
to utilities.
It
so,
could.
yeah.
Well, isn't that what the batteries for? Is for
yeah, that's what I'm
batteries?
saying. They can run off the grid. So somebody said, well, I think they mean up in the mountains somewhere in Timbuktu. And I said, let me go back and look at the form.
Yeah,
No, I said, we're not providing advice. That was my advice to them.
yeah,
So it says that a portion of the system installed anywhere other than the roof. Some of them are ground mounts, so they should know that. So that shouldn't be a big deal. Now, regardless of the solar power system's own leased or subject to a power agreement, any transfers or any other fees for change of ownership, and I can tell you right now, there's always a fee. Some of them are less than others. That I have seen cases, believe it or not, that don't charge. So it's kind of a tough one to figure out. So you have to check with the solar company to find out. It can run $100, $500. I seen one 1,000. It's just all over the place, so who knows what it is. Most of these cases now do charge a fee. Somebody said, well, why is that the case? Because they use third parties for the transfer work out of, and most of these companies come out of Florida. And that's all they do. You know, they just, you know, and so they charge a fee for the transfer. Whether there's a maintenance agreement on the solar system, you'd have to know that. And whether it's still in play, that's generally an additional charge. The maintenance agreement is generally an additional charge. So, material facts and information related to the solar power system. It would have to be something that's been damaged, or they've been told that it's not working properly. In other words, they have these systems that tells them, what type of production it is, does it meet the minimum? If the customer has that much savvy about it, then they need to put that information in there. Because otherwise that could be a disclosure issue. Somebody said, why is that important? It's important because those things are being monitored on a monthly basis, right? So there's a record and they're sending the information to the customer. So they would have some knowledge. So, if applicable, own solar power systems that are conveying with the property. This one is very important because it has to do with liabilities. The others have liability issues, but it's generally between the solar company. The reason why this one is so important is the information is coming directly from the seller, where the others were telling them to contact the solar company. So we don't want to provide any information there that we have obtained. We want the seller to provide all the information. So it says whether the system still has a balance due. Well, they ought to know if they still owe money on it, right? If they have a balance, they need to put the dollar amount there. Because we've come across solar systems that they're not making the payments and they're behind. Is the monthly payment due on the financing? These are all important things. Is it secured by an interest in the title? And that means that it still owes money on it, so it's got a lien. And if yes, is the loan transferable? I can tell you right now, in some of these contracts I read, it says yes. You try to transfer one of them monsters, and it just don't go well. We've never had any successes with it. And they've come up with more reasons why they won't do it. I'm not saying it can't be done, it's in there, but they create so many obstacles, it's hard to do. The true up bill, if you guys don't, it's an annual bill. Okay, you wanna know if it's a true up bill, somebody said, well, you know what I did, I went and got the true up bill the last 2 years with my seller, and that's what it's gonna cost the new buyer. Is that correct? No, that's why I don't want you to say anything. If the customer says wants to provide a true up bill with this, their last 2 years, hey, that's their business, what they pay. Because the family size changes.
Right.
And that's where it gets crazy. And so stay away from it. And I don't even like the approximate bill amount being put in it, but I mean, that's the customer thing, that's their deal, provide a copy of it, they do whatever they want. Whether there is any other liens or encumbrances, title, they would know it's tied to the property tax bill, it could be. The property tax bill is tied to the whole fund. Whether the power purchase agreement, if yes, is under 6, and we're talking about C. And this is a lease power system and power purchase agreement. You're going to find most of the stuff that I'm dealing with nowadays is power purchase agreements. And it has to do with tax credits because they can get it for nothing. So that's the biggie. So I'm not seeing much in the lease arena. I'm not seeing much in the purchase agreement because most of those rebates went away. The rebates are tied to the power agreements and the battery backups. So this one's getting to be somebody said, well, I didn't know I had one. I said, you walk around the side of the house, you see this big old box around there. And all these, power things going up to the side of the house and out. That's a battery. You know, there's a box there, but if there's more than one box there, that tells me there's probably battery backups. There's always gonna be one. But when you start seeing three, you know, they sold them two of them, or whatever. The name of the company or the power agreement, whoever it is, put the name in there. The year the agreement expires, it will tell you if you have a contract, the client can put that in there. And the current monthly solar payments, what that is, whether the payment is fixed or varies life of the agreement, they can be fixed. But most of them vary.
Bill,
Yes.
it's Brad.
Brad.
I wanted on that last thing you were talking about, fixed versus varying over the life of the agreement. From my little experience, I know that I think they call it, I don't know if they call it an escalation clause, but basically they have some provisions in some power agreements that they can increase it, let's say 2% a year. And it's also possible, because I've seen it done, that either the buyer or seller can pay the solar company to do away with that, to modify it so that the payment will stay the same for the term.
Yeah, let me address that. Some of the power agreements, you are correct. Most of them have 2% escalation clause in them every year. So the leases do too. So both of those are chronically in that. There are some of the early on ones had a fixed rate, but that's not the case anymore. You won't see one with a fixed rate. You could see, based on what you're saying, is you could see it with a lease. You can see it with a lease, but the power agreement, guess what happens with the power agreement? You're buying power back from the power company, the power source. So whatever rate structure that when you originally got your lease, that is going to escalate every year. I haven't seen one that was fixed. It has to do with power. You know, I mean, the bottom line on it is the power is coming off of it. They're just turning around and selling it back to you. And then, of course, you know, they're using the power lines of the Edison company. And then you got a lot of people don't know it. You got a lease or you got a power agreement, or you got any of it. The Edison company actually makes money off of it because they're the source of the line. They're the highway to get from one point to the other. So you got to watch out for it. Brad's absolutely correct. You'd have to look at it, but the customer really is the person that needs to understand what they're doing.
Right.
These systems they need to be regulated, and they're not. It's because the state wants them. And so at some point, it needs to come under some regulatory compliance, but it's minimum at this time. Most of them are transferable. The power agreement, the lease is always transferable. I've never seen any problems with it. The power agreement is transferable also. So I don't see any problems with either one of those. Whether the solar system is not owned at the end of the agreement, you'll see in all of those, it's subject to negotiation. I'm gonna be honest with you, nobody's gonna take that junk off the roof. You know, and here's what happens with solar. Solar is like anything else, any other commodity. You know, we used to have you could have a refrigerator in your house that was good for 30 years. Well, you go out and buy a refrigerator nowadays, if you get 10 or 12 years out of it, consider yourself fortunate. Do you seriously think that solar panels are going to be around 25 years or 20 years and function properly? No, they're not. There's nobody going to pay money to take it off. But I won't be around 30 years from now to be able to discredit that statement and say, oh, you know, I guess I misjudged that, so I'm not gonna worry about it. So the problem with it is, it's after 5 years, I'll be frank with everybody in this room and also on this thing. Technology is improving every year, right? So once you get to 5 years, you know, your technology is gonna change in the next 5 years.
It's dated.
You know, I mean, good old AI, he'll figure out how to do these things more efficiently. So the bottom line on it is all gonna change. So that's what you have to understand. When you guys are working on this stuff, you have to be careful. Because the client keeps trying to drag you into it. I mean, the bottom line on it is what I'm finding is they're saying, well, you know, you guys are the experts. No, we're not experts in solar. Zero. And you gotta keep it that way. You're working in, somebody asked me about solar and new construction, and we start doing resale on some of these properties that are 2 or 3 or 4 years old. You guys have to be careful in this arena, and let me tell you why. We could have an overlaid property very easily. If they got a maximum FHA loan, or they got 100% VA loan, and we got solar on that house, on that property, and it's leased, or it's power agreement, we gotta make sure there's enough equity in there to be able to get your commissions and closing costs out of it. Because I can tell you right now, they'll get into your commissions real quick. And because we found that these solar companies, they don't give an inch. We've already dealt with a couple of them. They could care less if it's overlaid or what. Because why? They've got the seller hooked to a private contract. And then also they know they got the property lien. And what we're running into is these people that we're working with out here in the solar arena, that when we're trying to negotiate with them, they're nothing but loan sharks. And so you gotta be careful. These people that's what they do all day. I call them debt collectors, you know, they're tough to work with. So you guys have to have some understanding of that. There's nothing wrong with us selling solar. It's just us understanding solar. I've seen solar that worked for people. If they got houses with pool, swimming pools, and they got a lot of 2 stories with a lot of open, beam areas, that it could work. But for all practical reasons, somebody that's has a utility bill of $250 a month, going out and putting solar on their property, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's just our personal stuff, right? I appreciate everybody coming today. Is there anybody that has any additional questions that I can answer? Yes.
Would you put solar in your house?
No. The answer to the question is, would I put solar on my house? No. You know why?
Why?
We're working in the real estate business trying to sell houses today. And we have buyers who will not buy a house that's got solar on it. So my concern would be, why would I put something up on the top of my house that's going to create a problem for me to sell my house in the future?
Right.
Because you have to look at it this way. You put the solar on, first 5 years, it's probably going to function correctly, right? You're getting all the benefits. You're getting, in some cases, you get tax write-off, you own it. And then this guy comes along, or gal, or whoever it is, and they buy it. And they say, why do I have to pay off the other 25 years of your lease? So it creates a problem for you, and that's the reason. And of course, I wouldn't get it anyway. The bottom line on it is, it doesn't make business sense to me. But it depends. There are cases where it could work, like I said, with pools, big 2-story houses. It could possibly work if you signed a strong enough contract. You go to a person that's been in solar, in which I've talked to in the past, is that if you did solar prior to them changing the rules back in April of over a year ago, the bottom line on it is it probably made some sense. Now, when they made those changes, it don't make any sense. It is because they changed the rules. Somebody said, well, what was the rule changed? You used to be able to sell solar back to, let's say, the Edison company or whoever it was, PG&E or whatever it was. You sold it to them and they had to sell you that same amount of power back at wholesale. But guess what now? You sell it to them and they sell it back to your retail. So if you're buying it at retail, why would you even do it?
Bill,
So, yes.
Here's another thing to consider, because I've been hit up by solar companies over years. We've never put it on. And here's one of the things that people don't think about. Solar's only going to take care of your electric bill. And we have we have a first-class Speed Queen gas dryer. We have a gas cooktop. We put in new Rheem gas furnaces with our air conditioning, a new gas water heater. All of that stuff would not be affected by solar anyway.
Yeah, you're correct. You're all gassed up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always all gassed up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Everybody have a great day and thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome. That is true. I never even thought about it. You have all the gas appliances.